WASA Distance Education and PLAR English. And this is our second class in week 6. And so after this week, only 3 weeks of classes to go in term 1A. So of course that means you need to get your key questions done and submit them for marking as soon as possible, because we are over halfway through the term right now. Just a few things before we begin, the usuals. Just a reminder that students can participate in classes in 2 ways: on radio by calling into our studio, or by using Zoom. And the instructions for getting into a Zoom class are in your study guide. Or if you don't have a study guide, you can ask your DEC, or you can contact me for help with getting into your class. Of course, you need to do that before the class begins. All PLAR students, PLAR English students, are welcome to attend the PLAR English classes, so it doesn't matter what version you signed up for, if you signed up for Radio Zoom or if you signed up for IL. All PLAR English students can attend the classes and get help with their work. To contact me, you can use email, phone, or send a message on Facebook, whatever works best for you. Students who were working on the PLAR last year or in previous years can keep working on the key questions and continue to submit them. You just have to make sure that you are signed up for this school year. And the PLAR classes from last year are still available on YouTube and will be updated as we record new classes. So if you're working ahead of where we are in the PLAR English right now and you need a bit of help with that, the PLAR English classes from last year are still available on YouTube, and that's the same thing with the PLAR Math. If you're working on PLAR Math this term, the recorded classes from last year are available on YouTube for you to watch. Or, of course, you can contact me for help as well. Okay, new to PLAR this term, this year, we're starting. All PLAR students can write the culminating activity before doing the lessons, or instead of doing the lessons and key questions. So if you feel confident about your skills in math or English or history, geography, or science, any of those subjects, you can request to write the culminating activity, which is the test that comes at the end, before or instead of doing the lessons and the key questions. If you pass the culminating activity, then you don't have to do the key questions and lessons. You just do the culminating activity and you're done that subject if you pass it. If you don't pass it, then you will be required to do go through the lessons and complete the key questions, and then you'll get another opportunity to write the culminating activity after all the work is finished. So again, you can basically challenge the course by writing the test or the culminating before or instead of doing the lessons. Okay, and that goes for any student. Even if you've already submitted some work, you can still do that. Okay, so just a reminder that there are 2 types of questions in your lessons. There are support questions and there are key questions. The support questions are the practice questions that you do before you do the key questions. Okay, so you'll notice that the support questions are scattered throughout the lesson. So you'll read a section and then there's a support question to practice what you just read about. Then you'll read another section, there's another support question. So the answers to the support questions are located at the end, or actually not right at the end, but near the end of the lesson, right before the key questions. So after you do a support question, you can go to the end, check your answers against the answers that are there, and then if you're doing well with the support questions, if you're getting all or most of the answers correct, then you can move on to the key questions. If you're struggling with the support questions, then you need more time with those questions before doing the key questions. Okay, you can go back, read over the material again, contact me for help, or watch the classes again. And then once you're feeling better about your answers to the support questions, then you can move on to the key questions. To submit your work, there are several different ways. So you can either give it to your DEC, who will send it out to us here in Sioux Lookout. If your DEC is away or your learning center is closed, then you can submit your own work. You can, if you have access to a scanner, you can scan and email your work to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and make sure you also CC it to me so that 2 people are getting it on this end. Or if you have access to a fax machine, you can fax your work to us. Okay. If that doesn't work for you, you don't have a scanner or a fax machine, that you can still submit your work. You can use your smartphone. With your smartphone, you can either take photos of your work or use the built-in scanner and scan your work. And you can either email it to that same address, studentwork@nnec.on.ca, and CC it to me, or you can send it using Facebook Messenger. So scanned work or photos can be sent using Messenger as well. Okay. There is also in the parking lot of the WASA building in Sioux Lookout, an outdoor mailbox, so basically a drop box. You can drop your work in there, or you can just knock on the front door and give your work to whoever answers the door. Make sure, I should mention this before, make sure you include your name on your work somewhere, otherwise we do not know who did it. The course that you are doing, and your teacher's name if you know it. And you should know it because your teacher's name should be on the cover of each of the lessons. So include your name, the course, and your teacher's name on your lessons. Even if you have to just put a piece of lined paper or something there, or just write it up in the corner, whatever, make sure your name especially is on it. Okay, you can also use Google Docs. So you can type your work up using Google Docs, and then you can send me the link to that doc, and I can print it from my end or mark it from my end. And then, of course, you can always use Google Classroom. So if you want to go paperless, then you can use Google Classroom. You can also just use Google Classroom to see the work, and then you can do it on lined paper. Yeah, so whichever way you want to use Google Classroom. The lessons are there, the work is there. Okay, so we'll start off with a review of what we covered in our last class on Monday. So we're going to be finishing up lesson 2 today. All right, so and starting lesson 3 next week. So of course that means you need to get everything, all your key questions for lessons 1 and 2 finished by the end of this week and sent out to me for marking, so that next week you can focus on lesson 3. Okay, so on Monday in class we were talking about the short story. So a short story is a brief narrative that generally focuses on 1 or 2 main characters who face a single problem or conflict. So a short story is basically short. It's what the title tells you. It's a short story. All stories excuse me, have certain elements to them, certain things that they all have in common, and then all stories must have. So the elements of a short story excuse me, or any story really, are first of all the characters. Okay, every story must have characters, and the characters might be creatures, dragons, or King Kong or something like that. They might be just regular animals, or they might be people. They could also be insects, or there's lots of stories about bugs and everything out there, aliens or whatever. So the characters in the story, and in a short story there are fewer characters than in a novel. So there might generally the story focuses on 1 main character. Then we have the setting. Okay, so the setting is the time and place of the action. So where and when the story happens. So it might be in the past somewhere, during the Middle Ages, or during one of the wars or something like that. It might be in the future, so something that hasn't happened yet, or it might be kind of present day. So it can happen at any time. Sometimes the setting is very spelled out. It might be very specific because maybe it's important to the story, or it might be very vague. So it might just say in a house. Okay, we don't know where the house is, what time of day it is, how big the house is. We don't know anything about it. depends on how important really the setting is to the story. Okay, then the next element is the theme. So the theme is the main message of the text. A theme is not one word. Okay, so some people might say, well, the theme is courage. No, the theme is not courage. Courage is the topic of the story. The theme might be courage is something that we all can find when we most need it. Okay, so the topic is going to be a part of the theme, but it's not the actual theme. Okay, next is conflict. Okay, the conflict is the problem that the characters face. And there are different types of conflicts that we talked about. There are internal conflicts. An internal conflict is a conflict that happens inside the character. So basically, something like making a decision. Okay, trying to decide something. Might be deciding if you're going to move, from one town to another or one country to another. Might be trying to decide if now is the right time to go on a vacation. Might be trying to decide if you want to get married, or maybe somebody asked you to get married, and you're trying to decide, well, do I really want to get married? So it's basically an internal thing. It's making a decision. There are also external conflicts. An external conflict happens outside of the character. So this is and there are lots of different types of external conflicts. So there's man versus man. It could be woman versus woman as well. So, or person versus person, I guess. So it could be, two people actually having a fist fight, like a boxing match or something like that, or a wrestling match, or one person gets mad at another and punches them. That's an external conflict. It could be, husband and wife arguing. It could be two kids fighting, anything like that. It can also be person versus nature. So somebody trying to survive in the wilderness or trying to survive a tropical storm or a hurricane or something like that. It's person versus society, so protesting against something, racism or taxes or something like that. So there's lots of different external conflicts. And generally with a short story we stick to one conflict or problem, okay, because it's difficult to, if you have more than one conflict or problem, then of course it's going to take longer to tell the story. And a short story obviously is short. Okay, then we have the next element is the climax. So the climax is the high point, or the climax is actually more a part of the plot than the element of a short story. The climax is the most intense or exciting part of the story. So it's basically where the excitement it's the point where, okay, right now you have to make a decision, or two people are fighting and one person hits the other person and you're waiting to see if that person is going to fall down or whatever. Okay, so it's the high point of the story. It's where you're on the edge of your seat, basically. Then we have the plot. And the plot is basically the events in the story. It's what happens in the story. So the beginning of the story, okay, beginning is where we meet the characters. We find out who the most important person in the story is. We find out, where, we find out about the setting, and we might find out a little bit about the conflict. And then we have the middle. So this is where the things start happening. So the rising action, you want to call it. So we start to meet other characters. We find out more about what the problem is. Things are happening. And then we hit the climax, so the turning point of the story. This is where the person makes a decision or something happens. And then after the climax, then we go toward the end. So we have the resolution, which is, okay, so now this person is knocked out. everybody's excited, things are happening, and then we have the conclusion where, fairy tale, they lived happily ever after, or whatever. Okay, so the plot is the events in the story. Then we have, the resolution is actually part of the plot, just like the climax is part of the plot. And then we have the next element of a short story, which is the point of view. So the point of view is who is actually telling the story, who's talking. Is the story being told from a first person point of view? So if it's a first person point of view, the narrator, so the person who's telling the story, is actually in the story. They're actually using words like I, me, we. So they are in the story. So for example, I went to the football game with my family. So I went with my family. We had fun watching our team win. So it's telling about something that happened to them. The second person point of view is where the narrator is talking to the reader. Okay, so basically possibly giving instructions, something like that. So for example, you forgot to eat breakfast this morning and now you're hungry. So using pronouns like you and your. And then the third person point of view, the narrator is outside the story. Okay, in this type of point of view, this type of narration, the narrator is telling the story, and the narrator might be telling the story from one person's point of view, okay, telling everything about that one person, or from everybody's point of view. So just limited or an all-knowing. So for example, Chris loved playing soccer. She had practice after school on Tuesdays. So using pronouns like she, using people's names, and other pronouns like they and he, her, those types of things. So that's point of view. So those are the elements of a short story. Okay, the elements of plot, I've already mentioned a few of them. So this is a plot diagram for the story The Three Little Pigs. So this is basically the plot of The Three Little Pigs told in very, very simple format without all the details. So the exposition, which is the beginning or the introduction of the story. So this is where we meet the characters and find out a little bit about them. So the three little pigs leave home for the first time. Okay, so that's the exposition. Then we have what's called the rising action. So in the rising action, we have the first event, which is pig number 1 builds a house of straw. The second event, the big bad wolf blows down the house and eats pig number 1. Event number 3, pig number 2 builds a house of wood. Event number 4, big bad wolf blows down his house and eats pig number 2. Event number 5, pig number 3 builds a house of brick. Event number 6, big bad wolf can't blow down the brick house. Okay, so now the story is getting more exciting. Event number 7, wolf tries to trick pig number 3 to come out of the house. Doesn't work. So now we have the climax, the high point of the story. What does the wolf do? He decides that he's going to jump down the chimney to get pig number 3. He's determined to eat this pig. So then after that, we have the falling action. So what happens after the wolf jumps down the chimney? Well, the wolf falls into a boiling pot over the fire, and the resolution, this is the very end, pig number 3 cooks and eats the big bad wolf for revenge. Okay, all the stories of the three little pigs don't end that way, but this is basically a plot, the plot of the three little pigs. Okay, just small little details that give you the gist of the story, but don't tell you everything that's going on. Okay, so that's what we looked at in class on Monday. So today we're going to look at reading and responding to news articles and key question 11 about news articles. So before we actually get into news articles, we're going to look a little bit about look at strategies for answering questions. So obviously, On Monday we had, after we read there's a story for key question 10, there is a short story that you have to read, and then you're going to respond to that short story. You're going to answer some questions about that short story. So there's different ways, different strategies for answering questions. So now that you've practiced answering questions about a short story, we will look at some reading techniques that you can use to answer questions. So understanding, this is in your lesson. I'm not supposed to be reading this. In your lesson on page 17 and 18 are some strategies and help for answering questions. So let's have a look at the question-answer relationship. So there are 4 types of questions that can be asked. The first type of question are what we call right there questions, or sometimes they're called hand questions. Literal questions whose answers can be found in the text. So all you have to do is read through the story and the answers are right there. So on Monday, when you started looking at those questions for key question 10, some of the answers are right there in the story. All you got to do is read through the story and find the answers. And in order to answer these type of questions, you have to read the story. Often, the words used in the question are the same words found in the text. So the answer is right there. So who are the characters in the story? Well, you read the story, you find out who the characters are. What happens in the story? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Why did it happen? So these are called the 5 W's. Okay? Who, what, where, when, why. And those answers are often right there in the story, or they are right there in the story. Okay. The next type of question is called think and search questions. These questions, you have to read the story in order to answer these questions as well. But these questions, the answers are gathered from several parts of the text and put together to make meaning. So you might have to read, instead of one paragraph and find the answer in one paragraph, you might have to read several paragraphs. So for example, the question might be, what is the character, a certain character, like? And in the first paragraph, it might tell you that they're kind. In the second paragraph or the third paragraph, it might tell you that they're tall and thin. So you have to look around you might have to look around for the answers to find out what that character is like. It might not just be in one paragraph. So the answer is in the story, but you have to look around for it. It's not going to be on one page. So a question might be summarize the main events in the story. So then, of course, you have to read the story from beginning to end. How did the character feel at a certain point in the story or whatever? Find 2 examples. They're probably going to be in different places. What caused, and then retell. Those are the type of words or phrases that those types of questions will start with. Then we have the third type of question, which is the author and you. Now, for these questions, you don't have to necessarily read the text. It's a good idea to, but you don't have to. So these questions are based on information provided in the text, but the student is required to relate it to their own experience. So we talked I think last week about when we're talking about reading comprehension, drawing on prior knowledge or prior experience. So this type of question requires you to draw on your past experience, your own experiences. So although the answer does not lie directly in the text, the student must have read it in order to answer the question. So predict what will happen. So, partway through the story, and you might be asked to predict what will happen if the character does this. What is the main idea of? What could be another title for the story? Why did the author write the story? Okay, so these questions are basically your opinion. And then the fourth type of question are called on my own questions. These questions do not require the student to have read the passage or the story, but he or she must use their background or prior knowledge to answer the question. So for this one, you don't have to have read the story, but you must draw on your past experiences in order to answer the question. So have you ever? Now, if the question says, have you ever felt like the character in the story? Well, then you're going to have to read the story to figure out how the character felt first. So you don't have to read the story, but it's a good idea to. How would you feel if? So this question might be, how would you feel if your best friend told your dearest secret or something like that, or told your most precious secret or something like that? So you don't have to have read the story. So those are the 4 types of questions. And you will meet those in the different courses that you do. So now that we know the different types of questions and we know how to answer some of those questions, what to think about, something that you will find in a lot of your English courses, especially this one, is you're being told to answer a question in a complete sentence. And we talked about this back in lesson 1 as well when we talked about writing sentences. Answering questions in a complete sentence is something that a lot of students do not do. So when you are answering a question, you should be using a complete sentence so that it makes sense, especially in writing. It's not so bad in talking, because if someone asks you a question in person, then you can answer it right away. You get feedback right away, so you know what you're talking about. But if you're asking someone a question and they're responding, a couple days later or whatever, and all they're giving you is their answer, but not in a complete sentence, you read it and you go, what? What's he talking about? So use a complete sentence. So when you're using a complete sentence, it means you're answering using the same words in the question. So you're taking some of the words from the question to make your answer. Avoid one-word answers, especially yes and no. Yes what? No what? It makes no sense. It's not a sentence. Avoid sentence fragments. Sentences must include a subject and a predicate. So we talked about sentence fragments in lesson 1 as well. Okay, here's some examples. How would you describe Tom's relationship with his mother? Okay, so you've read a story about Tom and his mother, and then you're asked, how would you describe their relationship? Okay, so the answer is their relationship is loving. But if you just put down the word loving, that's not a complete sentence. It's one word. What does it mean? To write a complete sentence, you would have to say, Tom's relationship with his mother is loving. Or Tom has a loving relationship with his mother. Okay. Example 2. What does Miles' decision not to gossip about the new student demonstrate about Miles? Okay. So if you just said willingness to stand alone, that's not a complete sentence. If you just write down willingness to stand alone, what does that even mean? Okay, so then you need to take part of the sentence. Miles' decision not to gossip about the new student demonstrates or shows his willingness to stand alone. Okay, and you can't just say Miles' decision demonstrates his willingness to stand alone. His decision about what? Okay, it's still not complete. So you need to put it all in there. Miles' decision not to gossip about the new student demonstrates his willingness to stand alone. Okay, example 3. Do you agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team? Okay, yes. Or yes, agree. That's not a complete sentence. Yes, what? Agree with what? So you can say, you can start by saying, yes, I agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team. Okay, again, you can't just say, yes, I agree with Sophie. Do you agree with her about what? Okay, so make it complete. Make sure that your answer is complete and that anybody who reads your answer knows exactly what you're talking about. Yes, I agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team. Or just, I agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team. You don't even have to put the yes there. Example 4, why did Olivia fall asleep at the kitchen table? Okay, so because of her math test. Because of her math test what? Okay, we need a complete sentence. Olivia fell asleep at the kitchen table because she stayed up late to study for her math test. There. Okay, so that's a complete sentence. So if you read that, then you know exactly what's going on. Okay, you don't have to question anything. Okay, so let's move on. Then there's some more examples there, but we don't need to go through those. Let's continue on. And so now we're going to look at, we looked at reading short stories. Now we're going to look at reading news articles. So beginning on page 19 of your lesson, so page 19, 20, and 21 have some information about news articles and how to read them and what to look for. And then on page 21 you have support question number 21. You have a photo with a caption and things, and then on page 22 is the rest of support question 2. So make sure you do that support question before you move on to the key questions. And there's your story for your support question there on the next page. Okay, so let's take a look at news articles. So the importance of news. News is important mainly to inform the public about events that are around them and may affect them. So that's why people listen to the news on the radio, or they read news articles, read a newspaper, or read an online newspaper, or get online news or whatever, because we want to know what's going on. That's the whole point of news, is to give us information. Often news is for entertainment purposes too. So entertainment news, to provide a distraction of information about other places people are unable to get to or have little influence over. So news can also make people feel connected. So we learn stuff through the news. News is important as a social gathering space, hence newspapers, either online or physical, place an emphasis on the news. Where there are a lot of people gathered, there is opportunity to advertise. So if you got a lot of people reading newspapers, then you're going to have advertising. It could be online, it could be on the TV, it could be just reading a newspaper. There's advertising. This advertising sometimes can cause a conflict of interest in the way news is reported. So sometimes, because advertising gets in the way, some people, depending on the type of ad it is, might mistake an advertisement for news. Okay, especially online these days. You'll see a lot of stuff that you're reading through it and you think it's news. You think it might be something about health issues and things like that, and then all of a sudden somebody's trying to sell you something. So that's advertising. So you need to be aware of that type of thing. Okay, the importance of local news, so from our local community, so like our Sioux Lookout Bulletin or the Wabate News. News from a local area is often important to advise people about activities that may have an impact on a community. This can allow a community to engage in decision-making processes in a community. So we find out about things that are happening in our community. So for example, if there's a COVID outbreak or a flu outbreak, we find out about it, we find out where it is, and then we decide if we're going to stay away from that community, if we're going to wear masks, if we're going to get vaccinated or whatever. The importance of national news. So this is within the country. Having a national news focus can allow people to gain a sense of national perspective. This is particularly significant for countries that have a diverse range of population centers, such as cities or towns. So during the pandemic, national news was important because it let us know where the most severe cases of COVID were. So you learn that this community has almost 100% of the people in this community have had COVID, so then you want to stay away from that community. Okay, you don't want to travel as much because you don't want to get COVID or spread COVID. So national news is important, and not just for diseases, but for other things, so that we know, for example, if you're living in the States right now, you want to know about the hurricanes and which places you need to stay away from, or where help is needed, where to go if you want to help out. So national news is important. The importance of international news. News from one country to another is important in today's global economy. Okay, lots of international trade going on, so we need to know what's going on there, which countries are having problems and stuff like that. Knowing what is happening in other countries gives people a perspective of each other's way of life and cultural differences. So we learn about other people, especially with a lot of the immigration now. Certain kinds of news from countries that rely on each other for energy or other resources can often have a profound influence in overall global economics. So news is important on a local level, on a national level, and on an international level. Okay, the 5 major components or parts of a news article. So every news article will have these 5 major components. So first of all, we have a headline. So the headline is basically the title of the article. It is located at the top above the body of the article. So it's the first thing that you're going to see is the headline. It's usually in a larger font. The byline states the author or reporter who wrote the article, and that's usually in smaller font. So here's some examples here. So this is the headline: NAN hosts 2022 education meeting. The author, the byline. So when you think of byline, who is it by? A line that tells you who wrote the article. So the author, Rick Garrick. NNEC makes modifications for high school delivery during pandemic. That's the headline. The author or the byline, Rick Garrick. And then long-term drinking water advisory lifted in Satchko Lake First Nation. That's the headline. And the byline, Tim Brody. Okay, so headlines and bylines. The next thing that we have is a lead paragraph. And the lead paragraph is the very first paragraph in the story. It's the hook that captures the reader's attention. It's what makes the person want to read the article. The lead paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences, sometimes only 1 sentence, typically gives the main information about the subject, including who, what, when, where, why, and how. So as looked at earlier, who, what, when, where, and why are the 5 W's, and then we have the H. Okay, so these are always present in a news article, the 5 W's and the H. So here's an example. Northern Anishinaabe Education Council, or NNEC, plans to operate the Dennis Franklin Cromartie and Pelican Falls High Schools under a quadmester system this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It also plans to operate the Wassa Distance Education Center through its usual remote delivery system with learning centers in the communities according to the school calendar that was approved this past spring. So we have the WHO, Northern Anishinaabe Education Council. We have the what, plans to operate these different schools under a quadmester system this year, quadmester system, that's what. When, this year. Why, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've got who, what, when, where, the schools, Dennis Franklin, Cromarty, and Pelican Falls High Schools. So I guess, well, basically Thunder Bay and Sioux Lookout. So we've got who, what, where, when, why, and how, according to the school calendar. Okay, so we've got basically all the 5 W's and H in that very first paragraph that's 2 sentences long. Okay. Next, we have the explanation or the body. So this is the part of the article that gives more information about the schools, the operating system, gives more information about the why and things like that. So the explanation adds more details to the lead paragraph information. This includes supporting information and quotes, okay, that flesh out the lead paragraph, giving it more substance. The purpose of the explanation is to provide the remainder of the most relevant information. So the information that parents, students, anybody else is going to need. So for Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School and Pelican Falls First Nations High School, we're making modifications based on Ontario's Guide to Reopening Schools. So this explains a bit more about why they're doing it. Recommendations from the Northwestern Health Unit, recommendations from the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, working with NNEC Legal Counsel as well as our Tribal Council partners and First Nations to provide a modified program for the 2021 school year due to the global pandemic, says Dobie Donfernette, Director of Education at NNEC. So here are your quotation marks. So this is a quotation by somebody who's involved in it. So most articles will have a quotation, something that somebody said. Initially, we should have been starting on August 24th when our students would have come out. Now we're looking at starting remotely only on September 8th, and we're moving from a 2-semestered system to a 4-quadmester system. Furnett says the 2 NNEC high schools will not be open for in-person attendance by students during the first quadmester under the remote-only startup. So giving more information about the startup of the school. And lots of quotes in here as well. Right now we're looking at using our Google platform, so Google Classroom for the online education. So how they're going to offer courses. So just giving more information. That's what this part of the article is all about. Okay. Then we have, after we give that, we have the additional information or the conclusion. So anything else extra that they need to know, but it's not as important. So this portion of the article contains the least important information pertaining to the event or subject. The author might add details about history or other events connected with the subject in these paragraphs. If the article becomes too long, the additional information is simple to remove without affecting the rest of the article. Okay, so what else? Furnett says DFC and Pelican usually operate on a condensed school year with longer school days, so students do not have to be away from their communities for the usual September to June school year. So that's not important to the changes that they're making, but it is a little bit of history. We're still implementing a condensed model for the quadmester, so once it is safe to open our schools for our students, then should their parents or community determine that they are able to come out to attend, we still want to make sure they are away from their home communities for a short time frame. Okay, so just adding more information, a little bit more history to the article. Again, but not necessarily important for the message that it's sending about the new system that they're using. Okay, and then most articles, not all articles, but most articles will have a photo and a caption. So this is a photo of Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School in Thunder Bay, and then we have our caption on the bottom that tells a little bit about the article, what the article is going to be about, or what the picture is about. So in this case, Northern Anishinaabe Education Council is planning to operate Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School and Pelican Falls First Nations High School under a quadmester system due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is in the lead as well. So your caption can be very similar or even basically the same thing that's in part of the same information that's in your lead. Okay, so another example of the 5 W's and H in a lead. So here is an article. choir members mixed business and pleasure at a recent national contest in New Orleans, April 14th to 18, where the choir reached first place all around. Who? The 5 W's and H. Who? The choir members. What? Mixed business and pleasure. Where? In New Orleans. When? April 14th to 18th. Why? There was a national contest. And how? By winning first place. Okay, so that's a lead sentence. So now the body would go on to talk about maybe how many choir members there were, what, the business obviously is the contest. What did they do for pleasure? Did they, go on tours or whatever? It's going to give you more information. National contest in New Orleans. Is this contest an annual contest, or is this the first time? It's going to give you some more information about it. Okay, another one, lead article. A lead for an article, sorry. Swimming was prohibited at Sunny Isles Beach Monday after a dangerous amount of bacteria was found in the water last week. Miami-Dade County health officials declared the Atlantic Ocean off limits because ingesting the water can make people, particularly children, sick. Okay, so the who, what, where, when, why. What? So instead of a who, it's a what. Swimming. What? So this would be the who, what. So sometimes your who might not actually be a person. It might be a what, a thing instead. So then it would be what. So then you'd have, instead of who, what, you'd have what. Swimming was prohibited. Where? Sunny Isles Beach. When? Monday. Why? A dangerous amount of bacteria was found in the water. And when? Last week. Okay. And then how? Miami-Dade health officials declare the Atlantic Ocean off limits because ingesting the water can make people particularly children sick. Okay, so when you're reading a news article, sometimes you need to make a prediction. So if you're just trying to decide, looking through a newspaper, do I want to read this article or not? So you might look and see, well, what's this article going to be about? So you might look at the caption and the photo, maybe read the lead. Okay. Why are predictions helpful when you read? They're helpful because it helps you think while you read and it keeps you engaged. Okay, so that's a little bit about making predictions. So you should make predictions when you're reading, and of course skimming and scanning to look for see, do I want to read this article? So when you're looking through a newspaper or magazine, you want to skim and see if it's interesting. You want to skim if you want to read something quickly to get a general idea, or you want to scan when you're looking for something particular, some specific information. Okay, so that brings us to key question 11. So look at the following headline, photo, and caption and predict or guess what the article is about. So here is the headline, local entrepreneurs donating portion of their sweater sales to help youth. And the article was written Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. There's your picture, and then the caption, Chelsea Gregg wearing the original sweater created with an uplifting message. Okay, so now what do you think that article is going to be about? Well, it's going to be about local entrepreneurs are donating a portion of the sweaters that they're selling to help youth. And you can guess where, in the community or whatever. Okay, so then the article is on the next page. It's just a one-page article, so read through it carefully. And then on the next page, you're going to fill out this chart. Complete the chart using details from the news article. What is the headline? So the article title, basically. What is the byline? Remember the byline. So the headline is basically the title of the article. The byline is who wrote the article, who it's by. Who was involved in the story? The main people. Who are the main people in the story? What is the main event? Okay, what is the most important event? Is it creating the sweaters? Is it donating the money? What's the most important thing? When did the event take place? So in this case, it doesn't say when, so you can put down when the article was written. Where did the event take place? Okay, it'll tell you in the article. Why did it happen? Okay, so why did they create the sweaters? and how did it happen? And or you can, instead of how did it happen, you can, for the how, you can say how did people feel about it if you can't figure out how it happened. Okay. Okay. All right. So that is your key question 11. So that is the end of lesson 2. So like I said, next week we will start on lesson 3. Now on Monday there is no class because Monday is the Thanksgiving, of course. So WASA will be closed on Monday. So our next class will be Wednesday next week. Okay, so yeah, that's it for our class today. Good luck with those key questions. Please contact me if you need any help with it. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and have a very happy Thanksgiving weekend. Miigwech.